I want to talk about where I come from, my background, my journey, and how I ended up standing here tonight. I was born in Staten Island, New York. I grew up in a household that was pretty similar to most, a nice middle-class neighborhood, relatively suburban. I had an interest in politics from a very young age. I always thought deeply about issues and wanted to understand both sides of every argument. My interest started with typical hot-button issues, and by my freshman year of high school, I was already interning for political campaigns. It was during this time that I really started to think deeply about what I wanted to do as I grew up. During those campaigns is where I learned to go door to door, dropping campaign leaflets, always in the door handles or on the gates, never in or on a mailbox. It was my first time seeing candidates engage with constituents, learning how to canvass a neighborhood, interact with voters in a time before social media even existed. I kept working in politics throughout high school. I interned in Borough Hall and got to see government from the inside, but honestly, at that age, I didn't really understand very much. I went to college majoring in political philosophy and political science, still on the path of wanting to be in politics and maybe even becoming a lawyer like so many others before me. During my junior year, I did a semester at American University in their Washington semester program and immediately fell in love with DC. We used to joke that DC was Hollywood for geeks. I was completely taken in by it all, the buildings, the halls, the symbolism, seeing equal justice under law on top of the Supreme Court for the first time, visiting the Lincoln, the Jefferson. I loved the history, and I loved what it stood for. I stayed for a second semester in DC, interning on Capitol Hill for the first time, and then a nonprofit focused on community policing. I moved back almost immediately after graduation and started working at American University, making $32,500 a year and thinking I was rich. While working, I began a master's in public administration at night. A few years later, I took a job at the National Institutes of Health, my first real experience inside a federal agency. It was steady work, but I realized pretty quickly it wasn't where I wanted to be. So I went back into politics. I joined a campaign of a young candidate running in a primary against a longtime incumbent. It was my first real campaign job. I worked around the clock, days, nights, weekends. I remember staying up for 24 hours straight on election night, sleeping on the floor of the candidate's house for about an hour, then getting right back up for get out the vote. That candidate lost. It was a tough loss. After all the time, the effort, the exhaustion, and it was an ugly campaign, full of mudslinging, accusations, and pressures from entrenched interests. The idealism I felt when I first saw the monuments of DC was fading. Like many people in DC, I hit what we called the expiration date. Everyone leaves eventually. You take what you've learned, you go home, and you try to do something good with it. So I went back to New York. I applied to be a teacher. I started looking for a teaching fellowship, but it was postponed because of budget cuts. So I went back to what I knew. I joined another congressional campaign. This one was to fill the seat being vacated by the same congressman I'd worked for as a college intern. There's a story behind that race, but that's not for this speech. It was a contentious race. I worked for a city councilman running against a former state senator. My experience gave me an edge. I was productive, and I was still cheap. Eventually, I was asked to drive the candidate. If you know campaigns, you know what a big deal that is. You're young, underqualified, but now you're in the car all day, hearing everything, seeing everything. One day, Mayor Mike Bloomberg called the candidate while I was driving. Bloomberg wanted a third term, and he needed my candidate's vote to change the law. I watched it unfold in real time, the pressure, the back and forth. My candidate resisted at first. He said, "Mr. Mayor, you're killing me. I can't do this." But eventually I watched him crumble. He gave in. The same day, we had 2 breakfasts, 2 lunches, 2 dinners, and a fundraiser. Every meal was just another opportunity to collect a check. I learned how to eat just enough not to look rude, knowing another meal and another donor was around the corner. We won that race, but I knew it wasn't the life I wanted. Too much pressure, too much money, too much influence. I worked one more campaign after that, a city council race with a candidate who had plenty of resources, but very little direction. The operation was sloppy, and the motivation didn't feel genuine. It was the final straw for me. Finally, the teaching fellowship came through, and I entered the classroom. After several years of teaching, I wanted to try something new. Samara and I had met while teaching at a high school in Manhattan, and she had started tutoring on the side because we were both teachers trying to make it in New York City. We realized quickly how hard it was to travel to students' houses. The math just didn't make sense. So one day, stopped at a red light, we saw a 500 square foot space for rent. We rented it on a handshake. We had no credit. I don't know how. We rented it on a handshake. That was not in the speech. I just threw that in there. That's how unbelievable it was. Within 5 years, we had 3 locations. Then the pandemic hit, and everything changed. I gave my uncle a call who lived here in Holly Springs, and I knew I was going to have to rebuild, and I wanted to do it somewhere that wasn't New York City. And so I gave him a call, and not long after that, I moved down to Holly Springs. You know, I started to fall in love with this town in the same way I fell in love with DC, but not for the same reasons. Here, it was the pace, it was the community. It wasn't the grandeur or the symbolism, it was the people. And every time I drove down a different street, Sunset Lake Road, and seeing new families, new homes, new businesses opening their doors, it was realizing that this town was still becoming what it was going to be. We reopened Resource Room down here and started all over again. We met families, we listened to students. We saw firsthand what this community values: family, education, opportunity, and a sense of belonging. I'm running for Holly Springs Town Council because I believe in this town. I believe in its future, and I believe the skills I've built as a teacher, as a business owner, as someone who's worked inside systems and outside of them, have prepared me to contribute something real and meaningful. I'm embarking on this mission supported by lived experience. I know what it's like to sign the front of a paycheck and the back of one. I know what it's like to fight for a student who's been overlooked. I know what it's like to grow something from scratch with nothing but grit, community, and hope. I'm not here to make empty promises. I understand what this job actually is. I've sat on the planning board, I've worked through zoning cases, I've read the Unified Development Ordinance. I know the powers of town council, and I know its limits. That matters, because we can't afford slogans when we need substance. I'm not running because I think Holly Springs is broken, and I'm not here to throw out vague promises of change just to create momentum. I'm running because this town is doing a lot of things right, and we need leaders who can protect that progress while guiding us through the challenges ahead. Over the past decade, Holly Springs has grown out of its adolescent phase and into a thriving, dynamic community. But with that growth comes more complicated decisions, infrastructure negotiations, and public-private partnerships that shape how we grow and how we live. We need council members who are not just well-intentioned, but well-informed. My career has taught me how to lead, how to negotiate, and how to advocate effectively across agencies. Without that kind of background, the learning curve can be steep. And while we are lucky to have an incredible staff in Holly Springs, talented, professional, committed, the best results come from a council that can match that professionalism with knowledge, independence, and insight. And I think that's really important. It's the collaboration between a strong legislative body and a high-functioning staff that truly moves a town forward. Now, there are things we need to accomplish. I want you to know that I'm going to fight for small businesses. And I've had a lot of you in here tonight that took my year of small business owners. I'm going to fight for you. It's the fabric of this town. Whether it's cutting red tape, making it easier to operate, or just having someone on the council who understands what it means to bet on yourself. We also need to get zoning and development right, especially as the land becomes more scarce. I've sat on the planning board, I've worked through the language, I know the difference between good growth and reckless growth. We need policies that are transparent, predictable, and built to protect what makes Holly Springs feel like Holly Springs. We are going to keep this economy moving by bringing jobs, opportunity, and maintaining a strong commercial tax base so we can fund the services we all rely on without overburdening our families. And when it comes to how we grow, it's important that we focus on projects that add lasting value to this community and that keep or improve the quality of life we have now. I will be an advocate of balanced growth with high-quality projects. I've told you where I come from, who I am, and why I believe I have the experience for this job. I've given you some basics about my plan and my priorities. If you want the deep dive, visit my website. It'll all be there. But for tonight, the most important part of this campaign and what matters most to me is this. Every single person in this room I know personally or professionally. We've crossed paths in schools, in businesses, in neighborhoods. I can assure you that the entire political spectrum is in this room tonight. I believe this community offers something rare, a break from the noise, a kind of relief, a resting place from the constant political division we hear at the state and federal levels. I'm willing to bet that when you walk through the gates of Ting Park, cast a line at Bass Lake, or watched a performance at the Cultural Center, not once did you stop to wonder what political party the people who built those places belong to. Because in those moments, politics don't matter, only the memories made and time spent with those we enjoy. Let's rise above labels and see each other for who we truly are, friends who look out for one another. Small business owners chasing a dream, proud members of one community, bound by purpose. There are moments like this one where the energy shifts, where the direction becomes clear, and where we're called to take action. And tonight is one of those moments. Don't let the loudest voices or the busiest thumbs convince you that we're broken or headed in the wrong direction just to gain some political points. Let's focus on the source of what unites us. Let's stay focused on what's real, what's local, what brings lasting value to our lives. So if you want a candidate who quiets the noise, if you want to preserve a sense of community, if you want to focus on what brings us together, on what we share, then you are absolutely in the right room tonight. I'm not here to play politics. I've done that before. Let's instead protect the things that matter and make sure we keep this town safe, vibrant, and beautiful. My name is Joe Cuccurullo. I'm running for Holly Springs Town Council, and I'm asking for your vote. This is our town, this is our future, and we can only build it together. Thank you.